And I believe we're live. I think we're good. So thank you everybody for being with us. This is another episode of the Union of the Unwanted. Today we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people have been talking about of late, and that's how do we make America healthy again? I'm glad this issue has become basically a hot topic recently with the RFK getting involved with Trump and all that stuff. But we're going to get into the specifics on how to make America healthy again, what our issues are, how do we resolve that, and much more. Of course, you can find all the links to all our episodes at theunionoftheunwanted.com. We live stream the show every other Monday, and then you can find the audio and videos on basically all the major platforms. So definitely check that out. And Charlie, I don't know if you want to add anything. I always seem to feel like I'm forgetting something.
No, this is a good place to start. It's a relevant topic, of course, because just open your eyes and look around and see how many people are unhealthy. And been through something recently over the last couple months. Reevaluate your priorities, especially when it comes to health. Nothing worse than feeling shitty. You know, you'd give anything to roll it back. And so, one of the themes that we've been, sort of focused on in the 4+ years we've been doing that is being proactive about it, right? Not sitting back and waiting until the wheels fall off to realize you have a problem, but rather let's take some proactive steps now, and so that we don't have to do twice as much work later when it's harder and we feel awful, right? So and so it seemed like the right time to do it. Not because Trump, it's always the right time to talk about health, honestly, but it's been, I think, a little bit more relevant as people start to have the conversation about what is fluoride and what are you talking about? There's poisons in our food and things like that. So I think when Ricky and I were chatting about what we wanted to do, it seemed like a logical step was to get all of the doctors that we know and all the people that make supplements that actually work to have a conversation about what we can do to get ahead of the curve so that we're not playing catch up when it comes to our health. So
Yeah, so let's talk. I don't know who wants to jump in first, but let's talk about maybe before we talk about solutions, let's talk about the problem. Does anybody want to jump into why they think, their thoughts on chronic illness in America, why it seems to be so much worse in other countries, and then basically we can expand on that into, possible solutions. Anybody want to jump in first?
Take a stab at it. So, Dr. Cohen and others on the call who are old enough to remember that for-profit medicine was anathema to even the most ardent allopathic medical doctor. They didn't want to charge money for parking. They thought it was horrible. What a horrific idea to actually turn a profit at medicine. It was more seen like a charity. And they had a social contract. As a result, every culture has healers, shamans, who have a high social standing, and they're, given the choicest hut or the choicest wife or the choicest meal, cut of meat. And that went south with this transition from late 70s and 80s in a very bad way. Now I'm talking parochially in America. I'm not talking about the Rockefellers and all those guys. I'm talking, that's a given, that's a backdrop. That's why it happened. But for-profit medicine, well, that I'll say is not a bad thing in its manifestation, leaving your ethics at the door and letting the administrators take over big medicine and making the bottom line more important. So you didn't want to talk about solutions, but think about what's more important, incomes or outcomes. Outcomes are far more important. We need to shift towards outcomes. And so when at the same time, all across all sciences funded by our government became narrative based, where confirmatory approaches towards science find confirming instances of your hypothesis. Don't test it, just line up all the confirming instances that you can, and then form a consensus, as opposed to looking at, oh, you should be your own worst enemy of your idea and try to disprove it as best as you can. And if a consensus emerges, it's because it's not only been you've tried to falsify it and it survives the tests, the evidence, a real critical test, the evidence used to examine the hypothesis in light of background knowledge. That's all Popperian science. If the consensus emerges, it emerges because somebody tried to replicate your results and they succeeded. And then another person tried to replicate your results of your study and they succeeded. The same person doing the same study over and over again creates a narrative, whether it's in psychology and it becomes not reproducible. And then we can point to the environmental exposures, of course. We talked at length with you guys here and published elsewhere in the peer-reviewed literature about aluminum and mercury in vaccines. Nobody has done anything about parts of the proteinaceous parts of vaccines that have to be tested by law for safety. They take epidemiology association as a test of safety of the entire vaccine and think they're testing the proteinaceous part. They're not. The test for proteinaceous parts of vaccines absolutely require dose escalation, dose variation, the same kind of studies that if you're going to bring a new drug to market. So yeah, there's some people that benefited from this for-profit medicine going into translational research, but then they realized they created a monster and it got out of hand because the accountants were more concerned about the bottom line, the income rather than the outcome. And so there's a homogenization of medical practice towards the allopathic model, not just leaving out osteopathy and integrative naturopathy and so on, but within allopathic medicine, there are options that are less profitable that are not brought forward. You go to your doctor and say, well, I'm going to try this new drug on you. Well, why? Well, that's what I'm doing now. Well, why? Ask the 5 whys. Well, because the pharmaceutical representative sent me to Hawaii last month, right? Or, and so there is a rule where they can't do that to the doctor, but they can actually make financial contributions to the practice that empowers the administrators and the accountants. Okay, so there's a law. It's against the law for them to take kickbacks, but the practice sure can. Tom.
I was going to just go after you're done. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. Okay. So these fundamental natures of the violation of the social contract. There's the evidence behind it include things like changing of the Hippocratic Oath, where they took out first do no harm, and the lack of informed consent on the informed consent forms. When you go into a hospital, you're given a tablet. You can't read everything, especially if you're elderly. You can't change anything. You can't object to anything. And in there, it always says that you're giving blanket informed consent that any person here that's got the right to practice medicine can do anything they want to you if they think that it's going to be of your benefit. You're signing away everything to them. And it's become a formality. But let's remember the reason why cultures actually create formalities. We create rituals in cultures because they're important, not because they're trivial. This is not a trivial thing to give informed consent, and yet it's given no thought whatsoever. When you go to the doctor, there's just you got to sign these papers, go ahead. And if you raise a stink, you're wasting time because time costs them money. They treat medicine like fast food. Get the patients through 7 minutes per well-child visit, or you're behind clock.
Dr. Cowan, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I have maybe a slightly different perspective that I've been thinking about the question of why are people so unhealthy? And I've for a long time said the problem with medicine is actually medicine. It's not, there's problems with economics and social and all that, but the real problem is medicine. So I've actually come up with maybe it's a kind of a metaphor of what the root of the problem is of medicine in, well, in the world, but in particularly our country. And I got this from observing my cat named Pumpkin. And so hopefully it will make it understandable to people. So pretty much after Pumpkin eats, he's a little orange cat. He goes outside because he can come in and out. And he goes on the deck. And then he sits on the deck and he looks around and then he sniffs the air. And then he wags his tail back and forth. And I actually have some reason, which I don't want to get into right now, that tails of animals are sort of like electromagnetic sensing and emitting devices. They're actually connected right to their brain. And he also listens, and you can see his ears going like this. Now, I don't know for sure because I'm not a cat and I don't know how to actually speak to cats, but and you guys can see whether you agree with this. What I think he's doing is sensing the world. He's sensing whether there's danger out there, because there is danger. There's bobcats, there's coyotes, there's hawks, there's eagles, and there's dogs around, but there's also woods. So he's sensing the environment, and he's using his ears and his eyes and his smelling and his electromagnetic sense. He's probably also assessing whether there's food in the area. There's mice, he catches mice and birds, etc. So that's how Pumpkin lives, and he does that for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then he goes off and does whatever he's going to do. And so far it's worked for the last 4 years because he always comes back safe and sound. Now, imagine somehow you could tell Pumpkin as he was sitting there, Pumpkin, there's a danger out there, which is actually a mortal danger to you, and you can't see it, smell it, hear it, taste it, nothing. You've got no sense at all that that danger is out there, but it could kill you. So what would Pumpkin's response be? Besides the fact that he wouldn't believe it. But if you think about it for a minute, what might be his response? Now, I don't know because it's never actually happened, but my guess is he would go and hide under the bed and not go out, and he would try to listen as best he could and smell and do every sensory input he could possibly do to sense whether this danger that he was told about was there. But it would be to no avail. Eventually, he probably wouldn't want to go out. He might even put a mask on. He might even social distance himself. He might stop eating because he couldn't relax. You know, you could call it his sympathetic nervous system would be activated. He wouldn't be able to sleep. Eventually, he would get weaker, and then he would go to his cat friends and say, hey, you know, I don't feel good anymore. You know, something's wrong. I can't use my usual senses to assess what to eat and where to go and how to live my life. And they would probably tell him, well, you know, that invisible thing that get you, you've actually got it and it's killing you. Once you convince somebody that that's the case, as far as I can see, they're toast. And what I have found in my 40 years of investigating what we believe in medicine, we have an entire population who is living just like Pumpkin, afraid under the bed. They have been convinced that they can't assess the world, whether it's healthy or not. They don't know how to do that. So they have to ask experts, what should I do? What should I eat? What should I exercise? How should I live? Everything in their life, they no longer trust that they can actually assess where they're at. And that person is eventually going to fall apart. And that's where we're at.
How wrong would they be if they took a look at their food, though? Because their food kind of is killing them, right?
Well, but they have been convinced that the mortal danger is not things that they can assess with their senses. In other words,
Great analogy for a virus. It's a great analogy for a virus, but chronic illness is caused by so many things. We absolutely, understand what you're talking about. If we could change everything about medicine and food and lifestyle, where people are seeking integrative pathways to health based on health goals, I agree with you. Medicine is horrible. We need to absolutely convince big medicine that iatrogenic illness, in fact, is not only is it the number 3 cause of death, it's something there are things we can do about it. And part of the benefit of naturopathic healing is that you're no longer in allopathy. That's how dangerous the medicines are. They give you one drug, you get a side effect, you get another drug for the side effect. Everybody knows this now. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And Ricky wanted to talk about solutions, problems first, but your analogy is an apt one for things, but people don't know that what they're putting in their mouth is also toxic and causing chronic illness. They don't
They
know
have learned
the
not
grass
to
that their
trust
children
their
are playing in.
experience.
They
People
don't
have
know that the
learned
grass that their
through
children are
schooling.
playing on is poison. They don't know this, but they can see it, but they don't know it.
But that's essentially been the purpose of the so-called educational system in this country, to convince people that that the things they can't sense, they have no experience of, are actually true and the biggest dangers to them, rather than teaching people to, as I think traditional people, if you can imagine a traditional person who knew what he was eating, got the food himself, understood where it came from, could smell it, taste it. You see, once you believe that tasting food is the way to get good food, you will never eat Doritos and junk food again, because you know that your taste is king, and that what you're trying to do is sense the world, and you trust your senses. If you can't trust your senses, you will be convinced to eat things, and then people will put stuff in your food and you won't know the difference, because you don't know how to evaluate anything, and then you're in the realm of experts, and then you're in big trouble.
I can actually
Especially-
attest to this, Dr. Cowan, because when my friend got cancer, we went to a detox center, and I basically ate sprouts for 5.5 years. That's basically what I ate: sprouted nuts, sprouted seeds, sprouted greens, sprouted beans, everything heirloom organic. And I can sense chemicals as I bring stuff up to my mouth. I never drink it now. I would never drink tap water, but I go to everywhere you go in a restaurant around the United States and everywhere. I can smell the chemicals.
Right.
I could actually smell certain people that would come into my house, and I'd be like, "You have type 2 diabetes." And they're like, "How did you know?" And it's like, well, it's not that I saw that you were overweight, or maybe I saw the neuropathy. I could literally smell it. Right. You can
Right.
very hypersensitive to these things that I
So
wasn't before at
essentially,
all.
what you've done is embark on a path of trusting, whether you are conscious or not, trusting your experience, believing your experience is more important than what so-called experts and so-called scientists, who often misinterpret things and are doing pseudoscientific work over and over again. So you've essentially left all that and said, I'm going to figure out how to make myself better at sensing the world. And my guess is it comes with a sort of confidence and health and experience and a feeling of freedom and relief, which you could have never gotten otherwise.
No, we literally thought we had discovered the fountain of youth, and I
Right.
couldn't wait to get back and tell everybody about it. Like literally, because I had been with allopathy, trying for my eczema and my digestive issues and all the, pooping blood for 2.5 years in my stool. All this stuff was pretty scary stuff. And then when I went there, I literally healed how to heal. I literally learned how to heal myself. And I got the education. I was thrown into complete immersion. And I walked out of there feeling so good. It didn't matter what anybody said or how many
Right.
degrees they had. I didn't believe them anymore. I have to have first person experience now on what anybody tells me before I'm going to tell anybody else about it.
And interestingly, when you talk about shamans and healers of old, those were the people who had worked on themselves, sometimes with like psychedelic drugs, so that they could actually experience more and see more and sense more than the normal person. And now we don't have that skill at all. It's like playing the piano. You learn through your life to sense more, see more, experience more. That's what's called learning. But we don't have that even idea in this culture. And so we end up sick, just like we are.
Can I share an experience from yesterday? So one of my daughter's 3, and one of her classmates had a birthday, and my wife is good friends with the mom, and so we went to the birthday, and I'm like, if you can remember that meme of a guy reading a book, and the title of the book is how to pretend you're indoctrinated enough so that you can fit in with society. My wife is always like, before these things, like, don't start telling them about stuff. So we're driving up to this little playground. There's a cafe right next to a cell phone tower. I'm like, okay, bite my tongue. Park, go in, and I just took a quick look at the food, and I was like, oh fuck, I didn't even have like a proper breakfast. I'm screwed here, because it was like just the most disgusting concoction of crap you can think of. And each birthday party that I've been at has been this disgusting concoction of glorified toxic slop, as I sometimes call it. And a couple of months before that, we were organizing my daughter's birthday party, and my wife was like, get a couple of bags of potato chips. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not getting potato chips for these kids. It's like, get XYZ. I'm like, no, I'm not getting that. So we were like going out of our way, getting organic snacks and trying to like make sure the kids are not eating poison, organic juices, stuff like that. Which I'm not saying it's the cleanest food ever. I'm not saying you can only trust organic, and then the problem is solved. But for me, it's like we go through all this effort and all this worry, and then now my kid, they're telling me she feels they're telling me she's gonna feel excluded when I don't allow, when they're having like Halloween things and there's candy. Excuse me. I'm like, I don't want her eating the standard candy. I'm gonna get organic stuff or whatever, dried fruit, this kind of stuff. And everyone is telling me, you're gonna make your child feel different. So I'm like the anti-candy guy, like the anti-vaxxer type thing. And it's really frustrating even with my wife, she understands all of this stuff, but it's just frustrating to constantly having to battle this shit. This kid is not even 3 years old, and I can still somewhat control what goes into her body, which at home is very clean food. But it's like, why are people sick? Well, all of these friends, for example, not to throw them under the bus or anything, but the dad's brothers' kids are autistic, and or one of them, at least one of the two. So I gave him a copy of my book on autism, my first book, and he barely acknowledged it. I don't even know if he gave it to the guy. So there's like layers and layers and layers of sort of complexity here to unravel, but at the root of it, people don't give a damn right now. It's like ignorance, bliss, apathy, like this sort of concoction of just really low level energy. And when you come in and say, guys, by the way, all of this stuff we're giving to our kids, I know they're kids, and let's have some sweets. It's poison. We can make slightly better choices. Yes, they cost a little bit more money, maybe double the price, but it's one birthday party. It's okay. You're gonna spend $100 more on the snacks, but I want to say that, but then I can't, because I'm gonna be ostracized from the group, and my wife is not gonna talk to me for a month. So just to go back to the question that Ricky posed, why is everybody sick, or why is the majority of people getting sick, and younger people getting sicker and sicker? It's because like we even the folks that are trying to sort of do something about it, they're gonna label you as something like you're orthorexic, or that's you're the weird fucking organic guy and stuff like that. So it's you have to really have a thick skin if you're kind of like, Tim, I'm sure you've probably dealt with this kind of stuff for a long time, but you have to have a thick skin, and then they'll tell you, oh, but you're the supplement peddler, you're peddling these supplement stuff, because they've been indoctrinated by the mainstream that say the supplements they're dangerous. Oh, they can bioaccumulate, vitamin A toxicity, vitamin D toxicity is gonna like calcify your tissues, and then nothing is said about the toxicity of these, symptom masking chemicals. They're being like, oh, your blood pressure's high. Never mind that it's maybe because you were fasting and your cortisol and adrenaline are high. That's why your blood pressure's high. Let me put you on a blood pressure med. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff. And people are like, oh, but the supplements are dangerous. They can, So anyway, sorry, rant. Big rant. But
No, it's okay. I mean,
for me, it's so frustrating as a dad. And Ricky, I'm sure you've been through that as well. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think something that, and I'll let Pat jump in next. Something that you're hitting on, and I think Dr. Cowan and Dr. Jack were talking about, that I always constantly repeat to people is, there's always this conversation of like, oh, prescription drugs are so expensive. Oh, these treatments are so expensive, or that treatment is so expensive. Why is healthcare so expensive in the U.S.? Should we have universal healthcare? And I always like stop them in the tracks. And I'm like, listen, why are we having this conversation? The real conversation should be, why do we need so much healthcare, right? And I think that's the thing that we just completely, people overlook. It's like, oh, how do we get our drugs cheaper? How do we, get this? How do we get that? Can we make a doctor visit less expensive? It's like, well, why do you constantly need to go to the doctor? Why do you constantly need to, so that's like, when we talk about solutions, that's like some of the questions I want us to answer and talk about and expand on it, because that is really the question people should be asking. Like, why do we require so much treatment and drugs?
Can I jump in for just a second? Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then,
okay, so I
cut him off.
I think what I'm hearing is that we all agree that the people just don't understand. There's no way they understand. And a lot of them don't want to know. But as Tim and I have gone through this, and I've talked to thousands of people over time, what I think the answer to that is to give them a positive experience. If you can give them a positive experience about a personal problem that they have right now, and they can tell within days or within hours that something that they have tried actually works, then I found that it opens the door and you can actually start to teach them. We all know that they're making virus, and then they're making vaccines to actually, I think they're making the virus, making the vaccines, releasing the virus, and then selling us of the vaccines. Then those viruses are actually mutating before they can do anything about it, and they're spreading.
Keith, explain to me how you know that.
Well, if you look at
hang on. He was making other points. I think he brought in that as an example, and there's another person waiting to talk. So I don't want to moderate for you, Ricky, but I want to stay on the topic that you brought up.
But I think the point is, if we can give people a good experience, then they'll listen to you. I found that to be absolutely true. And if we can do it in a quick way where they understand what it was, what you gave them, and how fast it worked, and they can feel that in a positive way, then they'll at least listen to you. And where people wouldn't listen before, I think they're listening in a huge way. If you look at JFK right now, nobody in their right mind would have ever said the things that he just said. But all of a sudden, we've reached a point where he's saying it and everybody voted for him. People who didn't even understand what he was saying voted for him to make those changes. And he said, look, I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to make your food safe. I am going to wipe out the divisions of the FDA, the big pharma one. And, there's a lot about it, But the point that I'm making there is I think that people are ready for a change. If we could give it to them and show them a positive effect and do it quickly, I think the door will open and we can actually teach them.
I have one comment to make very quickly about that. I'm not going to give a lecture. You're exactly right, Keith. And think about how many people woke up from the absence of a positive effect from the vaccine. Right?
Exactly.
When people realized that they could still get the virus after being vaccinated. Okay, so now, Keith, that's a brilliant thing. And I want to say everybody should give a naturopath a try. Give a naturopath a try. Give somebody who takes natural healing seriously and give them a try. And then have that experience. And by the way, Bangladesh did not have anywhere near the serious disease that we all had because they did what? Nasal rinsing. It's part of their culture. You want to have a positive experience this flu season. It's not a flu season. Go ahead and try regular nasal douches. That's a personal experience everybody can try right now, and you'll cut down the severity of any illness that you have that's called a respiratory illness, virus. It's fantastic. Now, that's not medical advice. That's try it out. I've tried it, my own personal experience. It's amazing how quickly you can get better sooner and prevent symptomatic infection.
Pat, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, Pat, can we get and for some of you guys who aren't familiar with Pat, it's been a while since he's been on the show. He's one of my favorite MMA fighters growing up, somebody that it's still wild having him on the call, like we're just buddies. And I grew up watching him on TV, and I was a huge fan. He's a UFC MMA legend, and I trained with a lot of people, other legends like Robbie Lawler and others. So he's somebody who's been around high level athletes his whole life. And I always say nobody knows how the body works much better than high level athletes, because you're always testing and tuning and trying to figure out what works and how to optimize your body. But yeah, Pat, please jump in.
I appreciate it, Ricky, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you and an honor to be here. Number one. Yeah, just so I get a better understanding of me, as I was sick my entire childhood with respiratory illness, agriculture chemicals, black mold, you name it. And I grew up in Iowa. I wanted to be a great wrestler. I was a good wrestler, struggled because of my breathing, one of those things. At the age of about 20, I decided that I was going to be a world champion in kickboxing. Had to leave college early, take care of my mother who was ailing with heart problems, working 3 jobs. I thought, well, I'm going to do something crazy. Anyway, I did a lot of research at that time and figured out how to heal my own respiratory system. That allowed me to do things athletically that I never dreamed of. I could run 10 miles at 5.5-minute mile pace all of a sudden, dunking basketballs at 5'10", bench pressing 400 pounds, winning a world title, and then training 95 pay-per-view athletes with the same inputs that I was using for myself. Created 12 world champions. Ended up working with a lot of very high tier 1 operators, military. Also working with them on being able to operate at high altitudes and do some pretty extreme things, and come back the next day and be able to do it over again was the key. So nonetheless, that was 38 years ago. About 28 years ago, though, I started researching soil. Both sides of my family come from the agriculture industry, and I recognized very quickly that the soil was causing all the problems, really. You can poison people with pharmaceuticals, but when you pound the soil with billions of gallons and billions of pounds of warfare chemicals and failed antibiotics, you're going to poison the entire, the land, the food, the water, and the air, and you're going to make everyone sick is basically what you're going to do. So therefore, our understanding, Steve Moore, who's one of our partners, I work with Dr. Will Spencer, both geniuses, amazing men, and soil to human health programs. So from my understanding and all the work that I've done over the years, when I look at the earth, I look at a honeybee, I look at a cow or a human being, it's the same solution across the board, that we are one big organism on the earth. We're just mites crawling around on it. We need the same nutrients, we need the same biology, and the mass murdering of the soil for 50 plus 60 years, getting rid of the extremophiles that have the ability to ingest heavy metals and synthetic chemicals and convert them into essential fatty acids and colloid minerals, thereby creating life and vitality on the earth. That process, they don't exist in the numbers, of course, that they used to, not even close. Iowa State University did a study in the late 60s, early 70s. Over a ton of microorganisms. Biology existed in every acre of soil in Iowa at the time. And now that's below 50 pounds and most of it's GMO. So we have weaponized microbes in the soil, and those microbes ingest substances in the soil and convert them into molecular structures that, well, technically speed up genetic modification, moving up the food chain. So for me, this war is at the soil. If we do not win the war for the soil, we're going to have a tough time winning any of it, really. But as far as I can't remember who was talking about frequencies. Animals 100% still have the ability to pick up on frequencies. For instance, the farm that I'm at here in North Dakota, purchased 2 years ago, started treating the soil with our programs, nutrients, and massive amounts of extremophiles to get rid of the toxins in the soil, and was pleasantly not surprised, but the pleasant results of this spring of thousands of birds all of a sudden showing up at a place where they never were, herds of deer, salamanders everywhere in the gardens, the orchard exploding, all of these things. So ultimately, those extremophiles that we and others had collected from extreme environments, sulfur vents at the bottom of oceans, mountaintops, jungles, forests, in a collection of over 1,000 of them, we turn those loose with proper nutrients and let them go to work on pesticide residues, herbicides, forever chemicals are reduced to nothing. Heavy metals are converted to colloids. And then, of course, things like uranium contamination are also corrected. So everything is food to these extremophiles, and with those, the proper biology, and the proper nutrients will always be the solution to health, because the environment, from my personal humble opinion, always dictates genetic expression. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Dr. Frank or Andrew, you guys want to jump in?
I'll let Frank go first. Age before beauty.
So I like to talk about my journey a little bit too. When I was younger, I suffered from a lot of illnesses, asthma, allergies, digestive issues. And back then, this is, my parents did their best. They took me to conventional doctors left and right and just got pumped full of more and more drugs. And then what happened was, this is prior to the internet, back in the 90s, I said, I got to figure this out for myself. I remember being in undergrad, I did my undergrad was in nutrition, exercise science. I said, I got to figure this out for myself. And what I ended up doing was I just, I did a lot of the research, and come to find out, read a lot of books and learned how to basically treat myself. And over time, I cured my asthma, cured my allergies, cured all of my problems as a young, dumb kid, So early on, I was really sickened by conventional medicine and how that was the mechanistic way of thinking, and just, the one size fits all model, disease-based model. So that led me into naturopathic medicine, and ever since then, I try to apply a lot of the things that I did to myself, to my patients, and using that, it's good to have a journey. You talked about your journey, and it's always good because you can relate. I can relate to my patients at this point. And giving them that sense of telling, okay, well, I've been through this. I had chronic Lyme disease 10 years ago, treated it myself. And, so when people have that story, they can kind of relate to you. And then that's how you change people's minds, I think, is by presenting them that there's other options out there available, and educating people is the biggest thing. I think the media is probably one of the biggest problems, the mainstream media, and, but people are learning. I get patients in my practice, and Kendra could probably attest to this too. They're pretty smart. I mean, they do their own research. I get a lot of patients that come in and they've done their due diligence, and they're just looking away. They just want someone to kind of corral it in. You know what I mean? So I get patients come in with a box of supplements and everything else, but you got to corral them in. And once you get to that point, I think we have to go broader with it. I think we have to get people that are going to get out there. And, RFK is a good advocate for this. And I like that, what he's saying. We've been saying, I know Kendra and I have been saying this for years, about the food supply and everything else. And I'm glad that he's putting it out there, because I get patients coming in now and saying, what do you think about fluoride? What do you think about the chemicals? What about chemtrails? What about and they're actually talking about it, whereas no one knew about this stuff before. And so making it mainstream is pretty cool. And I'm just happy that finally it's coming out there. So I just want to be able to. I'm glad to be a part of it too. And be able to put it out there to people.
Kendra, you want to jump?
Sure, absolutely. So, Frank Aida was my clinician way back when we were both in school 20 plus years ago. Even though I'm only 25, I was clearly a child genius, just so you know. So our relationship goes way back, and
Yep.
I absolutely and categorically agree with what you said. And it does come down. So as everybody was talking, I wrote a couple things down. My biggest issue, of course, is the power transfer, right? So once we started for-profit healthcare and you started taking your babies to a doctor so somebody else could tell them if they were sick or well. Once you do that and you take all responsibility out of your child rearing experience, it becomes somebody else's fault, responsibility, whatever. When it becomes somebody else's fault or responsibility, you have no emotional stake in it. And that includes in your own children in a lot of cases. So, and then Christian, I just want to point out, my kids are 15 and 18. We did the Halloween thing. My kids never ate any of that candy. What I did is I went home and we did experiments on candy, and I showed them how poisonous it was. We put them in vinegar, we put it in bleach, we put it in all kinds of stuff. And so if you change the because it's the thrill of the chase, and most of the candy you get from Halloween's crap anyway. And so I never even pose that to them when they were little, and that was like, you're getting candy so you can eat it. I'm like, you're getting candy so we can give it to the veterans, or we can give it to the people at the old folks home. And so that really helped. And then that's their experience with it, so you don't feel social pressure. Of course, I'm ungovernable anyway, so I don't have social pressure, but I feel like that was their experience, and they never talked about eating candy and getting a stomach ache. They talked about how many pretty colors the Skittles made when we added it to vinegar. So you can take that route when your kids are little and just change their whole experience. And I did that literally through their entire youth. It wasn't until I raised two athletes, and I have a boy that then became a hockey player. And it wasn't until he started going into the locker room with his coconut water, and the kids started with the colors of Gatorade. And I was like, you're not drinking that shit. And so then, what happened is he became the revolutionary, and everybody ended up with coconut water in separate water bottles. So don't think that the social pressure is getting you down. Look at the social pressure as being something that's going to help your kids have a leg up.
I want to add, there is a app called, I'm sure some of you guys know, but the listeners might not know, Yuka, Yuka. I don't necessarily always agree with, its opinions on fat and sodium. As a lot of people who listen to my show know, I'm a big fan of both those things. But it is great to just see what has preservatives and what how harmful they are and all that type of stuff. So if you download the app, you can scan things for free. I do with my kids because I'm trying to get my daughter's diet. I know she's only 8, but I try to start young, try to clean up her diet a little bit. And we'll scan things, and I'll tell you like if it's good or bad or whatnot, and then we'll click on and see what's in it. So it's a fun little thing. She'll do it just because she likes scanning everything in the house, and then so it becomes a fun little game where she'll scan things. And then the best part about it is that you can also go to healthy alternatives. So you can see the thing that's not good for you, and then it'll give you somewhat similar alternatives to that thing. So even things that seem harmless, like some of those mineral waters and whatnot, they seem harmless. Like they're like, oh, it's just water. How, it can't be bad for you. And then you scan it and you find out there's unhealthy things in it. So so much of our unhealthy or chronic illness issues aren't just one thing. I'm huge into health and nutrition, and dietary solutions are always a huge part of that conversation. But there's also a lot of environmental issues. Chemicals in our paint, chemicals in our products that we're buying, Wi-Fi, all these other things that can have negative effects on your sleep, all those type of things. So there's so many. I think we can fix a lot of our issues dietary with dietary solutions, but it's not the only. It's not our only problems. It's not.
No, it's the transfer of power. Like when they rolled out 5G and it killed all the birds in Portland. People should have said, we're not fucking doing this in our town, but they didn't. They were like, oh, we want faster internet. We want the Chinese to be able to hack us. Sign me up. So if there was more of an accountability for what you did in your house with your kids, you grow your own food, you work your own land, then you know what? That would become personal to you. But because there is such a dissociation, and case in point, you can go to a doctor and a doctor can tell you have cancer. And 72% of those patients believe that doctor over believing the fact that their body can heal themselves from that cancer. That's the problem.
And by the way, just to say what I did, I didn't want to project how crazy I am, but we actually had my wife got her doctor, because I don't have a doctor, I don't need a doctor, but my wife got our doctor to write us a letter that's stamped by a doctor, and I put the exact foods, that the only foods that they're allowed to give my daughter in that school. Nothing that's a seed, nothing that's a nut, nothing that's like an oil, unless it's coconut. Very specific things, no grains, no cereals, very few things. And you're technically not allowed to bring in things unless it's like in a packet, but we still bring in fruits and dried. But basically, we had it where the teacher would ask, every time they had a food that was questionable, she would text my wife, or she would ask us, is she allowed XYZ? And I would be the final arbiter on whether that's a yes or a no, based on my my work in kind of with children's health and nutrition and stuff like that. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And when we're going into this situation, my wife was like, what? I'm like, listen, come here, stop. There's a ton of other kids that are gluten-free, or they're celiac, or they have some kind of sensitivity or allergy. So these people in restaurants and everywhere, people are used to people having specific dietary. And what I tell my clients is, look, how do you eat clean when you're out? My personal strategy, and some of my clients are doing this, is when you go to the restaurant, just tell them, look, I have an allergy to safflower, the various seed oils. So I need you to tell the chef or whoever's going to cook my piece of meat or piece of fish to cook it either with butter, or, if they're not going to have tallow most places, coconut oil. I'd rather even have it cooked with olive oil, I tell them, rather than obviously sunflower oil, soybean oil. So people are very accommodating. So even like eating out, the way we kind of tweak a few things, you can actually eat fairly clean when you're out of the house, as long as you demand a little bit. You're paying for a service, therefore you are allowed to augment that service. You're allowed to shape the service that they give you. This is not McDonald's. Most places are not McDonald's, where you get, even in McDonald's, you can tell them, I don't want the bun, I don't want the lettuce, I don't want anything. Just give me the bag, I'm gonna breathe in the bag, and that's all I want. Here's $5 or whatever. So yeah, I think we have a lot of power. It's about not being afraid to exercise it and not being afraid. Like you said, Kendra, you have to actually become somewhat of an example so that other people would then be like, okay, well, I'm gonna stand up for my rights a little bit.
Well, I repeat it all the time. Kids don't do what you say; they do what you do, and it's not a surprise that when you see fat parents, you see fat kids, and vice versa, because they're learning to eat from their parents, right? I mean, it's not like we're born knowing how we eat. Like my son eats pretty good because he sees the way I eat, and so he's just like, for the most part, he's adopted some of my eating habits. Unfortunately, sugar and candy when you're around friends and birthday parties and stuff, that stuff's addictive. It's designed to be addictive, and it can, it can be a struggle to keep them off that stuff. But everything in moderation, even moderation, I guess. But I know Dr. Cowan has to leave. So I did want to just ask Cowan, and then we'll go to Nancy, who joined us. Long time no see, Nancy. Nice to see you.
Great to see you.
Cowan, Dr. Cowan, I'd like to get your opinion on, we're talking a little bit about solutions, like maybe what you do in your own personal life. What do you think has had the most positive effect on yourself, on staying healthy, staying energetic? Is it, turning off all the internet when you go to sleep? Is it focusing on sleep? Is it dietary? Is it exercise? Is it like, what do you do in your own personal life that you think has had the most positive effect on your health?
The single thing that's had the most profound impact, I'd say, on my health and my life is learning the basics of logic and thinking and the principles of science. The first one of which is you don't need to know what is true, because science is a exercise in falsifying claims. So you identify the claim, the positive claim, and you never let somebody bamboozle you into saying, well, what is true? You stick with investigating the claim, and if there is no way to falsify the claim, then it's a belief system. Now, there's nothing wrong with believing things, but you should not call that thinking or logic or science. Now, this comes up a lot in our life, including particularly with doctors and scientists. So, and I'm going to have to go in a minute, but people say, because what I'm well known for, I guess, this day is examining the evidence, the claim that such a thing as a virus exists. So I'll say, well, what is the evidence that this thing exists? And invariably they say, well, what causes COVID? Or what causes chickenpox? In other words, they're scientifically illiterate, meaning they don't know that this is that science is an exercise in investigating claims. Once you get the hang of that, then you realize that you have to live in this world of unknowing a lot of times. You may not know why somebody got sick, or why this happened, or why that happened, or why there's heredity, or all kinds of things. And so you have to convince yourself to live in this sort of what I call the land of uncertainty. This, by the way, is the spiritual path of the Hindus called neti neti. And it was also the strategy of Sherlock Holmes, who said, investigate the claim, find out what's not true, and what you're left with must be true. And what I've discovered in my life is that if you're willing to discard that which isn't true, somehow the world helps you out and shows you what is true or how to live. And since you asked what has helped me the most, once I've really committed to that way of living and thinking, there's just so many, there's a feeling of freedom and lightness and safety and just a feeling of belonging that you can never have if you don't investigate where you are in the world. So I'll leave you folks with that, and I got to go, and thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks, Dr. Cowan. Always a pleasure. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay.
Yeah, take care. And I know that Dr. Jack also needs to go soon. So let's go to Dr. Jack. He wants to share a couple thoughts also. And then let's go to Nancy, who, you know, I haven't seen in a while. So
I would much prefer to stay and listen to Nancy, but I have to go save my marriage. I've had 150 phone calls onboarding people through the Maha transition team. I'm on that team since the nomination, since the election. So Nancy, I apologize, but I do have to.
Well, I would say your marriage is important.
So I see four priorities for transformative research off the top of my head that are necessary. And Dr. Cowan was correct. We should falsify our hypotheses. We should try to disprove our ideas, not prove them. And so first is, since iatrogenic disease is the third leading cause of death, let's learn how to predict it, prevent it, mitigate it, and treat it. We need to take care of iatrogenic from drugs and vaccines. You guys realize we'll have a $47 billion budget to address these problems with the NIH alone, right? That's what the budget of the NIH is. 11% of the budget goes to intramural, the rest is extramural. I know how to incentivize the universities to do all of this research that we need. The other one is metabolic disorder and diabetes. I think we can reduce it. I think Dr. Kender and others here, like Dr. Frank, will agree that we can reduce new incidents of cases of metabolic disease and diabetes 25% per year easily. If population, we'll have all the messaging of the FDA, we will have all the messaging of the NIH, we'll have the messaging from Surgeon General. I know what people think about that particular pick right now, but that's just a potential pick right now. And your local health departments. That's an extension of HHS, right? You guys know that, right? So your local health departments will be sounding completely different. Preventing and treating autoimmune disease. Absolutely, we have to get on top of that problem. And we need to do this using, we have the keys to the castle and we have the bounty, we have the booty, we're gonna spend it right. So, yeah, so I want to leave everybody, when I leave this call, with a great amount of optimism. Keep your skepticism, it's really healthy, we need it, we thrive on it. Don't trust science, debate it, question it, challenge it. You play a critical role. The messaging that I hope you'll see, and I think you'll see from HHS is, hey, we're going to have a stakeholders meeting over here over this medical issue. And it's not going to be the pharmaceutical companies with the only seat at the table. They will be a seat at the table, but they're not going to be the only ones. We have to bring parents in, patients, parents of vaccine injured kids. We have to bring the true stakeholders, the endpoint consumers of all the products of translational research. They deserve a voice and they deserve a seat at the table. And so, the transformative research that I envisioned for NIH is only one small part of it. There's similar things. I mean, EPA, FDA, you heard already new messaging on toxins from the EPA, right? Understand that oil is not how America produces electricity. We produce electricity by a lot of means, but we don't burn oil for electricity. So the endpoint consumer exposure to toxins is going to be the talking point. How do we reduce that? And by the way, companies, you can no longer externalize your cost of harm on your budget. That's a cost you have to internalize. So we have to incentivize them financially through liability, including liability for vaccines. And yeah, if you have a business, it's actually a business threatening government that says we're going to reduce liabilities to corporations, because eventually these costs will catch up to them when the public figures out what's happening to them and they reject it whole scale. So I've said for years, if the vaccine manufacturers would just listen to me for 1 minute, I'm their best friend. Why am I their best friend? Because if they're going to stay in business, they're going to do it by getting rid of aluminum, getting rid of mercury, getting rid of the proteinaceous parts of the vaccine that cause autoimmunity. And if they have anything left, go for it. Have your choice, but don't mandate. Now you're still in business. You're about 100 times smaller, 1,000 times smaller. You're not going to be getting trillions. Population-wide vaccination is the cause of chronic illness in the United States. If I did a study on the number of unique diseases, new diseases of unknown origin in the published biomedical literature, from 1950 to 1976, it's flat. In 1976, until the present, it goes straight up. What happened in 1976 other than Fauci coming into office for the first time? Mass vaccination of the swine flu vaccine. That was the first whole population attempt to try to control influenza in America. So listen, what are we doing to ourselves? That's another question we're going to get all the time. Oh my God, what are we doing to ourselves? We'll finally be able to see ourselves as an ourselves. We're not going to we'll depoliticize science and depoliticize medicine as a side effect of, doing things in an accountable way and transparent way. So, Ricky and Charlie, thanks for having us. Thanks for having me and let me speak my piece. I hope that you realize the scale of the revolutionary reform that we're about to experience. Right? Go ahead.
Are you going after the 1986?
You say, am I going after it? Listen,
is it on the list?
One, if I were Bobby Kennedy, the first thing that I would issue, right, is I would revoke Rule 12 of the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program that says that all the vaccine injury cases that are there, nobody can see the contents. It's all behind. The public can't see it. Once all of that evidence comes forward from all those data dump of all the testimony from all the experts, you'll see the games. You'll see how HHS experts who are doctors absolutely make fools of themselves to try to lie on behalf of the government. And all the expertise on our side have said, listen, here's causality, causality, causality. Because if you go right now as a new vaccine injury family, you go up and you try to get a case, you're not able to access any of that. There's no precedent citing. So Rule 12 has to go. That's one of the first things that I would do. In terms of repeal, we're working on a clock. Realistically, we've got 4, 8, or 12 years. If Bobby runs in 4 years, and I hope that he does. So we have to do a lot in a short period of time, right? Changing legislation, that's actually a matter of Congress. It's not a matter for the HHS, right? But we'll see. There's so much more. I want to come back and I want to share as we go. There may be, hopefully, come a point in time where I can't just appear on a podcast. I have to get permission from my boss. But if Bobby's my boss, he might say, yeah, go ahead.
Cool. We'd love to have you back. Grab him.
Thanks, guys.
Come on, too.
Right
he can leave when he needs to. Thanks for joining us for as long as you have. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Nancy.
How are you?
What's up,
Good to
Nancy?
see you again. How are you?
It's great to be with like-minded people.
Yeah, so we kind of opened up about what we think is obviously everybody's kind of become more and more aware, and it's become undeniable that we have a chronic illness issue. Dr. Jack talked about the vaccine link to that. Obviously, food's a big link to that. What do you think is one of the major root causes of this chronic illness issue in the U.S.?
I think it's a mixture, honestly. And, I saw a little 4-year-old girl who now has so many issues after spinal taps and post-trauma stress disorder because the hospital didn't know what to do with her. She had a virus and now it just messed her over so bad. The parents are totally stressed out. So it affects everybody. But the typical family in Westchester County, very wealthy neighborhoods, and Greenwich, Connecticut, they don't know how to eat. They are totally stressed out. They don't know how to relax. You asked the question before, and I think the Cowan, what I got from that was mindfulness. And no one knows how to deal with stress. So there are so many factors when you look at lifestyle. And you look at family and you look at, do you pick out your own food? Do you know if it's corn-free, soy-free, or you're just getting organic or free range? Is your meat truly grass-fed? Do you call the farms? Like, you have to have the time and energy. And when families come to me, they're like, just give me a shopping list. I have no time. Then what I have noticed, though, because in the families from New York who got the religious exemption and paid their lawyers $10,000 for their kids to get this religious exemption, and then Cuomo took that away, where you could only get a medical exemption, and no pediatrician in New York in their right mind would do that. Those children who I saw before and after, they were all sick after. There was not one healthy kid after. And now they have all of these recurring illnesses, and we've done organic acid tests on them. We have a baseline before the vaccines and after, and you see a difference. And you see their levels of glyphosate, and they eat organic, and they have all of these allergies now. So I do feel that it's a combination. And then also, you know, if you also have to see the genetic of, like, what is that person, if we say biological mother and father, if we're allowed to say that, what was their health of those individuals, and how did they deal with stress, and what were they eating and drinking, and everything that we're exposed to. So in this day and age, we do live in a toxic world, but you can live healthy. Like, my kids are 26 and 28. They're 15 months apart. And, you know, who runs marathons? Who is working out 2 hours a day? And they have their own businesses, and they have been on brain-derived neurotrophic factors since they're 2. They've eaten organic since they're 2. They didn't get what was mandated, you know, so, and they have lived this life. They've never had a drink in their life because they don't want to. They are so into their brain, their body, their physique, and not in an ego way. They're trying to break, you know, 2:30 in the marathon. So to do that, you're not going to have some bad stuff. Like, I think that the education has to start at home. And I used to go to elementary schools and teach the kids, because it was easier to teach the kids than the parents. So the kids went back to the parents and told them. And now when I see these kids who are now in their 30s, they say, oh, you know what? I didn't understand back then, but I'm doing this, and I'm juicing, and I'm working on stress. So I don't think you can say it's one specific thing, because the water could be bad. It could have, you know, bad stuff in it, PFAS, glyphosate. The food, you could think you're having non-GMOs, but they're loaded with glyphosate. The vaccines are just another different thing. If you're going to vaccinate, you should definitely check if the child could detoxify and what their glutathione levels are, the N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C. Nobody checks this. You know, I personally say you could use your body to stay healthy as a part to putting a foreign substance into it. But it's an education. It's such an education. I see little kids being put on Adderall at 2 years old. Other kids put on high blood pressure medication for not even high blood pressure at 5 years old. So if we don't educate the parents to think out of the box and become their child's best health care advocate, you're going to, you know, you have this resistance. Because I know when people found out that I was into Robert Kennedy, they were shocked, and they called him a nut job. So, you know, these are educated people. And I'm like, well, I'm into health, and I'm into, you know, having better food and better this. And they were just afraid, oh, he's going to take our vaccines away, and he's going to take our medication away. I'm like, that's not what he's going to do. So people have this security blanket with white coats and medication. And I think that that's where we have to empower them to make the change, empower them by planting the seeds in a non-frightening, fearful way.
Well, it's not accidental that they have that relationship with the white lab coats and everything. As we've dug into this, it's a psychological conditioning to treat somebody that has that as above reproach. And how dare I question their medical credentials? They have DR period on their business cards, and I don't, and I'm unqualified, right? And as long as they're up, I kind of jokingly said, that they were going to, you know, how like when you board airplanes, you know, any parents traveling with young children, any active military, any active medical doctors, please board first. I mean, I was thinking that that was going to happen during the COVID insanity as yet another way to just elevate the doctors to a position where you just would have to be insane and disrespectful and anti-American and anti-science, of course, to ever question something that the doctor would say. And as long as that fear exists, I mean, most people you meet don't have the backbone to stand up to something like that. They feel unqualified.
They
And so
really
it's
do.
easy to
They
push
do.
them around.
And that's why you have to meet the person where they're at. So when I talk with a person, you know, they may clearly they're, you know, lots of them are very unhealthy, but I have to hear and listen. You have to be such a good listener and see where you could meet them, you know, and then you give them the power. So like I've had some people that were neurotic, quite frankly, during COVID and after COVID. And they were going to get, you know, they got their kids with the vaccine, them with the vaccines, and then they would get their flu shots. And by gently empowering them to show them that they have the power, that they can make this decision, now they don't do that. But it takes years. And that's where the battle is. Because yes, I think that the organization and Kennedy is going to do wonderful things, but you don't want resistance. You have to have this undercurrent way of empowering others to know that they can make these decisions and give them the right information. And I think that Instagram does a lot of harm because I'll have clients send me private, you know, DMs that say, oh my God, this person said this and this person said that, and the food babe and Momavation and this. And now I just gonna throw my hands up because now we have to check electrolytes for PFAS and we have to check this. And it's too much when you do it in that fear-mongering way. So it has to be in a gentle, empowering, nurturing way. That's what I see works best with. I've been doing this for 24 years. I also do run functional medicine lab tests. So that helps because they see it in black and white. Here are your numbers. And we have so many states where doctors will not check vitamin C. And they really give you a hard time to check B12 and even D. So at least we have these labs that you can get so much, you could gain so much insight on a person's wellness and where the imbalances are. And when you work on that, specific, customized, then they start to feel so much better. So now you've gotten their attention.
Yeah, and I think something that Nancy you talked about, and like you said, I think Dr. Cowan also kind of briefly scratched the surface on was the mind-body connection, right? A lot of times when we're talking about health, we just talk about like, oh, how do we improve our body? How do we improve, you know, how do we get bigger, stronger? How do we, you know, if it's a physical issue, you don't really, it's almost a external issue. You don't really think internally. And you know, it always reminds me of that book Mind Over Back Pain by Dr. Sorno, and you know, that mind body connection. And you know, if mentally you don't feel good, physically you're not going to feel good. And so there's all these things that I think are contributing to our issues. And you know, living in the East Coast, some of us live in the East Coast. It's a very fast-paced lifestyle. Like we're constantly on the go, on the go. We're never in the present. We constantly have this just burden of things that need to get done and priorities and just all these just things that are constantly on our mind and maybe even subconsciously just a burden on us. And we're never like in this peaceful place where we're calm and collective and focus on our mental health. And, you know, I constantly tell people that. I'm like, you know, sometimes people just look stressed or they look beat down, not because they're, you know, anything physically that they're doing. It might not even be because they're eating bad or whatnot, but it's because they're just stressed or overstressed and they're not taking care of themselves emotionally and mentally. And doing things like yoga, going for a walk, going for exercise. And, you know, I work out, you know, a couple times, at least 4 times a week. I play sports a couple times a week, every single week. I've done it since I was a teenager. If I go on vacation, I continue doing it. And it's not, you know, it's not because I care about my physical appearance anymore. It's because it's really for my mental health. I'm at my best when I'm exercising, when I'm doing something where I'm releasing some of this built up energy or frustration. And that's how I stay calm and collective. And it makes me a better husband, a better father, a better friend, a better coach if I'm around other people's kids who could potentially drive me crazy. It just, I'm just a better person overall because of these things. So a lot of times people just look at it as a hobby. Oh, you're playing sports, it's a hobby. Or you're going to the gym, it's a hobby. No, it has to become a lifestyle. And it really seems like we need to kind of take a minute to reflect on how our ancestors lived and got here before we had all these modern medicines and techniques. It's like, we almost need to pump the brakes and realize like we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe we should just appreciate the wheel and really just kind of go back to the way our ancestors lived. And anybody else want to jump in and talk about maybe solution?
Yeah, Ricky, I got a bounce, but I just wanted to Charlie mentioned like people are waiting to get advice from somebody that has MD behind their name. I actually have RN behind my name, which stands for redneck. So I'm going to summarize all this for the working class people so they can understand it. And by the way, iatrogenics is death by doctor or death by medicine. For those that have listened that didn't know, that wasn't clarified, and it's important because like words like that, like when my friend got diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, it took me 3 months to be able to pronounce it. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is going to go over the average American's head. And so to sum up the problems, the number one problem we have is stress. You just talked about it. Like if you're in a constant fight or flight, you're actually creating chemicals that you're supposed to run or fight something with, and you're not using them, so they turn into a toxic soup. Your ability to respond differently to stress is going to make or break your life, your quality of life, and how many years that you live, period. Even Western medicine, WebMD will tell you that you will take 17 years off of your life from stress, period. And it's probably worse than that. Number two, we have so many toxins and chemicals that you guys were all talking about tonight. The PFAS, the glyphosates, the fertilizers, the pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, larvae, all the stuff that's sprayed into the soil, and the plastics, and it just goes on and on. Then you have electromagnetic frequencies, and you have toxic people in your life. Don't forget about these toxins. Sometimes you have to detox these people out of your life. Otherwise, you're not going to heal. There's actually a doctor that has a 100% success rate with cancer, and he makes you get rid of the most toxic person in your life. It doesn't matter who it is, even if it's your spouse. But if you'll do that, he'll take you on, and he has a 100% success rate. So how important is it to detox certain people out of your life? And then the third thing is nutrient deficiencies. Because of the farms of over farming and all the tilling and the killing and the microbes that Pat Miletich was talking about, there's just, we're 85% deficient and we're not eating fresh food. And then let's wrap something around all of that. And that that's when you defer your power, you're outsourcing your power of your life to these other experts. That's where we're missing the boat. And Western medical doctors take the Hippocratic Oath. And it should have been, I do no harm. I guess that got outed. But he also said, Hippocrates said, he who is not his own doctor is a fool. He who is not his own doctor is a fool. So the most important thing that the listener can do today is take responsibility for every aspect of your life. That's it. You take responsibility for the food that comes into your home, and you start putting some effort into it, and you try to get fresh food, and you do the best you can. And it will be a journey, and you'll slowly improve as long as you're on that path. And you'll learn about these toxins from great people like that were on here today. All the doctors here, and you'll learn how to stop buying clothes that are, and toxic food and toxic, shampoos and deodorants and toothpaste that says harmful if swallowed, please contact the Poison Control Center. You'll stop putting that stuff in your mouth and your children's mouth, right? And then you'll start learning how to respond differently to stress through meditation practices, and instead of getting upset, creating some space in between that person and showering them with unconditional love, understanding that what they must be going through to act that way towards you, and it has nothing to do with you, and you're not going to pick up their baggage any longer. And this is how we're going to change things. I know the administration's changed and everything, and a lot of people are all excited about it, but the reality is for the last 70 years, these administrations have failed us. Okay, so I'm about the individual taking responsibility for their health and not waiting another 4 years waiting for Maha or anybody else to change everything for me. If they do, great. If they don't, I don't care. I'm going to take responsibility for my life. That's where I'm at right now. And if we take responsibility for our life, then the culmination of that, we have better families and we have better communities and we'll have a better world. So that's what I wanted to say about summing up that whole thing.
Tim, since you've got to run, wrap it up. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Our website is at chemicalfreebody.com. I got really big into the, getting chemicals out when I saw the umbilical cord blood. And we're big into detoxifying people and helping them to get good nutrition. But I like to give away a lot of free information with our podcast, Tim James Unleashed, and just it's more of a spiritual thing now. It's a raising of consciousness, right? It's like if you're from Earth, then all the solutions are in Earth. That's the mothership. It's the disconnect from Mother Earth is where all the problems are. Don't outsource your power. Go inward, go inward, go inward, and get outside and get into nature, and you'll be surprised how fast you can heal up and have a wildly abundant life.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you coming in for as long as we could get you.
Yeah, and this is so important because it's like people need to wake up to the fact that the experts, the government, they are not there to help you. Everything is a business. Health is a business. Medicine's a business. Everything is about power and control and profit. And you see it all over the place. I mean, I always use for newbies to the whole vaccine conversation. I always use the hepatitis conversation because it's like, why do you need to give that to a newborn? Like, you can test the mother for it. You don't have to give it to the newborn. Like, it's a sexually transmitted disease, or if you're sharing needles, like, and then they're like, oh yeah, that one doesn't make sense. And I always try to like get them to realize, like, okay, so what's the motive to give that one that doesn't make sense? Well, guess what? That motive is there for all of them. Right. So it's like sometimes you just need to take baby steps where it's like, okay, get you to kind of notice one thing, like I would send people when, what was that? The docu series that came out, that show, Dope Sick, right? About the prescription drug pills and the Sackler family and how they paid off the FDA to say that their drug was non-addictive, and it took a bunch of cops to realize, like, hey, I know the experts are saying this isn't addictive, but everybody who's dying from ODs are on these prescription drugs, not street drugs anymore. And I'm like, the way that worked is the way it works for all drugs. Like, there's tons of drugs that get FDA approved and then get taken off the market. Well, how isn't that the whole point of having a FDA approved drug, is to say that it's safe for use, and then it gets pulled off the market? And then people don't realize that, Charlie talked about the vaccine courts. That seems like something that's like common sense for most of us. But there's a lot of people who don't realize that they have zero liability. People talk about, oh, yeah, the COVID shot's dangerous because it has zero liability. And I'm like, oh, all the vaccines have zero liability. It's not just the COVID shot, So there's all these little things. They don't know that only us in New Zealand are dumb enough to let big pharma promote on TV, all these little things that it's like we are run by that industry, like big pharma.
And it's even worse than that, because imagine you took that off, that layer out. We are even obviously doctors, but a lot of folks in the naturopathic space, we are all drinking from the well of PubMed, and there's so much research in there that has been basically accumulated to push certain narratives. If you look at all of the research, just a simple example on cholesterol and stuff like that. But then if you look at, for example, the stuff around serotonin and the SSRIs, like even if you go on Wikipedia right now, you will see that there, at least the last time I checked, it will say, despite long-standing propaganda, they don't say the word propaganda, but marketing by drug companies that serotonin is low in depression, there is no actually scientific basis for that claim. Yet, if you go to a naturopath, very often they're going to try to boost your serotonin with 5-HTP. So on the one end of the spectrum, you have SSRIs and, serotonin reuptake inhibitors that build up extracellular serotonin. On the other hand, we are, and I used to do this as well, we are trying to boost serotonin. But when you actually dig deeper, a lot of these things are not what they have been marketed to be, like serotonin being the happy chemical or estrogen being a female hormone specifically, or even like things like testosterone and DHT making men aggressive. All of these things are the undercurrent upon which a lot of practitioners, I don't want to just say doctors or naturopaths, there's a lot of different types of practitioners, they're cutting their teeth. And even in my fifth edition of the textbook of natural medicine, if you start looking at what the tools in that chest are, very often it's things like fish oil. And if you start looking down the fish oil and omega-3s, and actually the research that proved the essentiality of even linoleic acid or alpha linolenic acid, or the omega-3s in general, even that whole body of research seems to be on sort of created on very shaky ground. But when you have an industries that build on top of it, like for example, the fish oil industry is like a $6 or $10 billion industry, we're just like layers and layers and layers on top of fraud and scams and propaganda. So I can understand why people are confused, and I can understand why it's difficult to, you will never find a straight path back to health. It will always be a meandering journey, like a sail. It will never power boat to the other side from disease to health. It will always be like this meandering journey. And the only thing that will accelerate that process is actually turning the fucking Netflix off or whatever the hell you're watching, and actually maybe reading a little bit or listening to some podcasts, and actually trying to educate yourself about the most important thing that you need to know about, and that is how to take care of your own vehicle. And there's a lot of guys out there that know more about cars or their hobby or whatever the hell, or their sport, or all the things in whatever their sport and the celebrities, than they do about even basic things like vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, and stuff like that. So I think when that becomes a priority, and it can only become a priority if you have that value instilled by your family, because it becomes very difficult to make that a value for yourself as a young or old adult, whatever. But that is where it becomes, once that thing becomes a value, health, longevity, whatever the hell that, whatever, so fitness, whatever gets you to that sort of that value that will make you want to take better care of your body and learn what that actually means. Because I talked to a lot of guys recently that they're like, yeah, dude, I'm trying to be like real healthy. I'm in the gym every single day. Like, dude, that's fitness. That has got actually little to do with health. And a lot of us are also, this is another way society has been engineered to think that the more you work out, the healthier you'll be. But actually, health, where does health begin and end? It really kind of, like we already discussed, in the kitchen, the food you buy, the vendors of food that you sponsor with your wallet. And the exercise piece is important, but that is just one part of a multi-pronged approach to health. And a lot of guys out there like, dude, but like I'm super jacked and so, like, yeah, you're shortening your life with that, because you're stressing your body out, but you're not actually doing all the other stuff like the recovery, the nutrition, soft tissue work, stretching, etc., stress reduction, blue light, EMF reduction, all that stuff. So
every time I talk to Christian, he's got a list of things that I'm not doing that I have to do. I've got the red light now because of you. You've got me on all these fantastic supplements. Yeah, exactly. I got it in the other room. So
one thing that I wanted, because what he said is kind of true. When you think about it, more people work out more than ever. When you look at, like, I mean, when our parents were growing up, there weren't really gyms around every corner like there is now. So it's like, obviously exercise isn't just the fix all to all our other health issues, when it comes down to environmental, when it comes down to, dietary, obviously, vaccines. So all these other things are quality of food getting worse. Look at the food pyramid we grew up with, like they were literally telling people how to get obese and be pre-diabetic. It's literally what's going on now. I did want to get because I know Dr. Frank Aeda, Dr. Kendra Becker, Christian, Nancy, all you guys, Keith, I'm sure when you're a health expert, you get a lot of people coming to you with their personal issues. It seems, and I'm far from an expert, but for some reason, people still come to me and ask me for my advice. One thing I'm seeing a lot of is since the introduction of the COVID vaccine, it seems like a lot of people, obviously, you're seeing all-cause mortalities going up and all this stuff. Are you guys seeing that? Are you getting people coming to you with like what seems to be unusual issues?
Yes. Yeah, I'm seeing everything from A to Z. I've never seen more chronic illness in all my years. I think, and it has to do with the COVID vaccine. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, obviously there's other factors in there, but I mean, I've lost a lot of patients over the past 3 years that have died, you know, whether it was a turbo cancer that developed out of nowhere, a reoccurring cancer, heart disease, blood clots, strokes. I mean, I just the other day, I had a patient, in their 80s doing fantastic. She was just so scared. And, after her 6th booster shot, a couple weeks later, she had a stroke. And then a week after that, she died of a heart attack. So I'm seeing it left and right, and I'm clean. And I say it all the time. I'm like cleaning up the messes from this whole COVID debacle, And, one of the problems is that in conventional medicine, it's this one size fits all model, Nancy kind of alluded to it when she was talking about, doctors aren't doing the testing that they're supposed to be testing, not in doing individualized testing. They're not doing this specific test. You're lucky if they run more than just a complete blood count, a metabolic panel, and a lipid panel. That's the extent of it. So patients will bring their blood work in and say, oh, I did so much blood work, and it's like 3 panels. And I'm like, this is worthless. I go, this is so rudimentary. It's not going to help.
Worthless is the word.
Yes,
Yeah, worthless.
it is worth. I was curious, are you seeing, I saw a lot of cases, so I was like in the epicenter of New York, right?
Yeah.
And saw a lot of college kids come down with leukemia, and they were all
Yeah.
males.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of women had miscarriages. They were very fertile before.
Yeah.
Several miscarriages for the same individuals, and as well as MS. That was what I saw.
I've seen a lot of autoimmune diseases, upticks in that. I've seen, I've been in practice going on 23 years. And within the past 3 years, I've saw 4 or 5 cases of ALS. I don't, it's like, what the hell is this? And with rapid decline,
Statistical anomaly.
very, very rapid decline.
Yeah.
So,
In young
other
people.
autoimmune diseases just turned on, and, or people that had an autoimmune disease, I have them in remission. They're doing great. They're forced to take the vaccine, and all of a sudden they call me and I have psoriasis all over my body. What happened? We had everything under control with diet and lifestyle. I said, well, you turned on this spike protein making factory in your body, and you're making all these autoantibodies, which you were already making before. Now it's just an uptick of it. So I'm seeing it left and right. It's just, and it's made my job, and I'm sure you guys can agree, it's made my job a hell of a lot harder to kind of identify what's the true pathology and what's secondary to vaccines, or just, it's not a good situation at this point. And I think it's, I don't know when it's going to start turning around. I think if people have gotten this vaccine, I think that their body's going to continuously make those spike proteins forever. I don't think it ever stops. I really don't, because I've had patients who, and I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I've had patients that have had the vaccine 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and they're still making antibodies to the spike protein. 2-3 years later, I check their levels, and it's like thousands of, it's off the charts. So I think their body is still producing it. And I don't see an end in sight with that. So, and we talk about infertility, once again, in practice, 23 years, within the past 3 years, I've seen more men with 0 sperm count, and women who have had children, and they're trying to have a 2nd or 3rd child, and they're in early menopause, and they're in their late 30s. I mean, it's amazing to me, so I don't know. Something's got to give. I think people need to be educated, need to really see what's going on. I mean, it's just, it is. We got to change the whole model of medicine. You know, the one size fits all model, we're doing disease-based medicine when we should be doing wellness-based individualized medicine. And that's, you know, as a naturopath, that's what I pride myself on, is that I can get 20 people with the same diagnosis and put out 20 different treatment plans. And yes, there's some overlap there, but there's always the individuality that conventional medicine is neglecting to look at completely. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is really getting the person to believe that they have the power and
Yes.
that to think out of the box, you know?
Yes.
And when I work with a person, they're like, oh, I thought you were just going to give me some protocol. I'm like, no, this is a
No.
journey we're going on together. So if you got to be committed, because I'll be committed to you, right? And then they start to learn about themselves. But I do wonder what the percentage is of the population that is willing to go on that journey with a practitioner willing to go with them. Like, some of them are just fearful, the uncertainty, they don't believe they have the power, they're brainwashed. So I think the challenge even for practitioners is how they can, in their unique way, get to the masses to empower them. So my business is called Total Wellness Empowerment, because you have to take the mind and the body together. But how do we get to the masses in a gentle way? I mean, it's work. It is work. And I'm very passionate about it. And I'm like, you know, it's great when they ask you how you live, or, you know, I put that up on Instagram because they know this is me. This is what I've been doing to help my son when he was sick. So I think that's the challenge all of us face, is how do we do it not frustrated? Because it's so much easier to say, you know, I don't want to just say, do this like a doctor. I want to teach them why.
I think
It's the
Okay,
starfish story. You know what I mean? It's you help who you can help. And yeah, I mean, you know, I got this from Dr. Aida himself, the original. He's like, stop taking insurance. He told me 15 years ago. He said people don't value their health care if they are stuck in a disease model. So when you have somebody paying a couple $100s and waiting 3 months to get in the door, you have their captive attention. And I moved to Florida 4 years ago. I still have an office in Connecticut because I have patients in Connecticut that have never seen another doctor. I have kids that are 18, 19 years old that have never seen another doctor. And so there's a value in it. And you have to really focus on the one or the two or the three or whoever it is that you can help that'll walk through your door, because then from that, there's your starfish story, and they're going to help 1, 2, 3. And that's how you change the paradigm. It's a town square mentality, because going on, you know, social media and pontificating about it, or like you said, the standard one size fits all, which is what got us in this mess to begin with, is really what dehumanizes people. And the precision-based medicine is what is going to solve all of our the vast majority of our problems.
Right. And that's, you know, and that's smart. I'm sorry, it's really smart with the insurance. Like I always say, so many, you know, when people refer you to someone like that, and then they hear, oh, do you take insurance? Oh, you don't take insurance. And you just say, you know, I can't work with someone from a poverty mindset, because that is what insurance is. I'm sorry to say, you know, and not condescending in any way, but that's what you're going to get. Like, this has to be customized. Your health has to be valued so much by you. So it's an education, and that's empowering. But I think that's like, you know, I always say it's one ripple effect at a time. And that's why I teach practitioners for a homeopathic company, because I just want to teach them to think out of the box, because now they can also then be the ripple effect. So I think that's another way how practitioners can help others too.
I think we also need, it's a numbers game as well, because I think another insidious way they make people steer clear of the more alternative is by calling it alternative. So if you go on Wikipedia, for example, if you look up what a client of mine was telling me the other day, she's seeing a kinesiologist. So I just popped it into Wikipedia of the specific type of kinesiology she was doing. And the first line was like, is a pseudoscience that has no proven, like, so they make everything look so ridiculous, like, the acupuncture, everything. I mean, they're always going to like disrespect these ancient sort of Ayurveda and stuff like that because there's no scientific base. But I think if the nice thing about it is like each one of us has a different sort of frequency we're emitting. So we're attracting a specific type of person. For example, I seem to attract a lot of women that are exactly my wife's age. And recently, a lot of guys that are right about my age that have had a similar journey in terms of their struggles with health and other stuff. So I think we all attract our kind of tribe.
Yeah,
and each and,
I
and
agree.
and the nice thing is when we go out on social media and we share parts of our life and people see that these guys are actually pretty cool, they're living really well, and they want to model that. I think then more, for example, I've had actually 2 or 3 clients ask me, where did you learn all of this stuff? I want to learn to do this stuff myself, and I've been kind of guiding them and helping them to kind of start learning this on their own. And I've had a couple of medical doctors and an osteopath and other practitioners also become clients because they were like so intrigued by the methodology I'm doing. So to me, it's like if we can just make this whole sort of functional paradigm cool, and people were out there like, damn, this is really sweet. 3, 4, 6 months of working with this practitioner, this thing stopped. I can sleep again. My dick is working. Excuse my, sorry, ladies. My dick is working again. My wife likes me. I'm not an asshole to be around. And so even men who are very difficult to get around to these topics, even they're like, wow, this is amazing. So we can actually make it cool, and then we'll attract even more and more people that way.
So if you guys want numbers on exactly what problems have been caused by the vaccine, they're all available. So on February 2nd, 2022, there was a huge meeting from the DOD. Now, the DOD has more health information on our soldiers, which are millions of people, than any other group of people in the entire US. They have mass amounts of data on all these guys. And on February 2nd, what they had was a huge whistleblower meeting. And they came out with numbers. They said, since you people have vaccinated our soldiers, these things have happened. And they had specific numbers, like types of cancer had gone up 900%. Infertility had gone up like 300 or 400%. Spontaneous abortions had gone up. There's a list of like probably 20 or 30 items on there with exact numbers. If you want that, I have copies of it. I can even text it to you. But the point is that the data is there. You can show that to any person who's had a vaccine and say, look, this is what you're up against. This is what you're headed for if you don't make some corrections. Now, the crazy part is that I am under no thought process that I can cure them all or I can cure every condition. What I've been trying to do is eliminate certain things and putting all my time and mass amounts of money into that. I do not know a single person who died from COVID, not one. And the data I got was from the University of Miami, University of Tennessee, University of Alberta put out a huge paper that showed that if you nebulized with a nanosilver, not a colloidal silver, but a nanosilver product, they showed that it could eliminate all these different viruses. Now you can argue whether viruses are alive or they exist or not. I'm not going there. But what they showed, peer-reviewed published study, 3 major hospitals, 3 major universities, 11 PhDs, showed that they could eliminate it by nebulizing it, wiping it out of the nasal passages in the lungs. And they showed you could do it within 3 days. 3 days. And we employed that with a whole lot of people, and we never had a single person who died. We had a lot that were really sick. There's another study out from 231 frontline doctors. So these are guys in 3 different countries. And the doctor, I think it was Jack earlier, talked about just rinsing out your sinuses. With this group of 231 frontline docs, was split into two groups. 117 who didn't, they were using some sort of solution to rinse out their sinuses, and it just said average whatever, and they were gargling with something. The other 114 were rinsing out their sinuses with a nano silver, and they were gargling with the nano silver. The difference in the study, which is a huge study, 231 frontline docs, all treating people in the hospitals in COVID, 9 weeks in the middle of the infection in the spring of 2020. And what happened was the guys who just rinsed out their sinuses, which is not even an FDA claim. Anybody could say, hey, rinse your sinuses out. But the guys who rinsed out their sinuses had a chance of getting infected of 1.8%. The guys who didn't or used something else to rinse out their sinuses, 28%. So published peer-reviewed numbers available, major universities. So I know I can't fix them all, but there are certain things we can do and do very well.
Yeah.
We're working on the eczema thing right now. It'll be out probably next 60 days, full FDA clearance claims, but no chemicals, all natural products that will be able to make direct claims on healing eczema. And we'll hit the market with that, and we'll hit it within the next 60 days.
And where's that going to be?
It'll be direct claims, but what I did was I married a nano silver that we knew worked into a monograph product that was actually a colloidal oatmeal. And we knew that colloidal oatmeal worked, but when we mixed them, the two of them together, the results we got were phenomenal. We're able to take a kid with massive itch and burn and eliminate the itch in probably 15, 20 minutes. And we can take a kid with them all over eczema all over his hand, cracking, bleeding, and eliminate it in a week. But what we're using is we're using natural ingredients, figuring out how to play the FDA game with them so we can get full FDA clearance, or in this case, using a monograph to make it an OTC with direct claims. We're calling it eczema therapy and active defense eczema therapy, but we know it works. So I think that our goal as naturopaths and as people trying to help other people is to figure out how to play the game, do it in a way where we can make direct claims, beat them at their own system, and be able to help mass amounts of people with things that are natural and healthy. And I believe, as I said earlier, that if we can have them have one good response, one good thing, and if they know that it works within a day or so, which they do, then they're open to us being able to teach them. If we don't do that, not going to happen. I mean, we're fighting a very uphill battle. But I think, together we're much smarter than any one of us. And I think if we work on these types of things and we find the good things that work across nature, there's a lot. My specialty is silver, but I don't think, and I know a mass amount about it, I have created more than 400 major studies and test series that we've done ourselves, not believing anything that anybody else has done. But I still, with all that, I don't believe that silver is the be-all end-all. I think if we use it combined with other things, we can make such strong and potent things that we can change health and wellness. Now, you have to do what you are also doing, and that's teach them to eat right and teach them to stop taking the chemicals and all those things. I can't get there at the moment because I'm single-minded. I'm just trying to figure out ways to fix their problems currently, because I can't look at a little kid that's covered with eczema and say, look, you need to take this drug that they're pushing that will kill you. I mean, it says right on it. If you listen to it on TV, it's for eczema. I'd rather have eczema, high blood pressure, bleeding in your stool,
Right.
all of these things. It's crazy to me that you would solve a lesser problem with something that would kill you. So my whole goal in all of this It's to beat them at their own system, be able to get approvals, and do it in such a way that we can make direct claims and provide all the mass amount of science behind it, which we do. Everything we do a lot. But the cool part is that I believe we can help people. And that's what we got to do. We got to change the mindset. But I think we do that with a positive, maybe even just one. And you all do that every day, right? You have somebody, you help them, and all of a sudden they listen. And that's the point. If you can get them to listen, then you can teach them. And I think that's what we're all about as a group.
When I had you on my show, Dr. Keith, I immediately went out and bought 3 bottles of nano silver. I'm still working my way. I sent a couple to my mom. I've got one. So I was thinking of you this morning when I was taking my nano silver, but we're at the end of the show. And what that means is I want to give everyone an opportunity to let the audience know where they can be found. Let's wrap up with you, Dr. Keith. Where's the best place for people to find your products, nano silver and the like, and to find out your amazing research that you've been doing on silver over the last several decades?
If anybody wants any information on silver, I don't care what the question is. And by the way, if I don't know, I'll just say I don't know. It rarely happens, as you know, but I have no problem saying I don't know. But I have a mass amount of data, and if people have questions, you can find me at Keith, Keith, at silverceuticals.com. And a lot of products you can find through Tim, Electric Silver. He's an outlet there for a lot of those great products and a lot of information. But I don't care what the question is. Ask away.
We appreciate it. Yeah, Chemical Free Body is a great place to go over and find Dr. Keith's formula of nano silver. How about Dr. Frank? Where's the best place for people to find you? Wrap this up with your thoughts too.
Yeah, you could go to my website. It's draita.com. Pretty easy. DRAIETA.com. And I'm on social media at Dr. Aida. So pretty easy. And I treat everything from A to Z. I don't discriminate. I'll treat everyone. I treat young people, older people. There's nothing I won't treat or take a good look at, because I feel that if you could always help someone. You could always help, even if it's a little bit beyond what a lot of times what conventional medicine can do. Just doing just basic stuff a lot of times. Most of what I see in my practice, which is good, is that a lot of times patients will come to me with these functional problems, and they haven't graduated yet to an overt pathology. That's the best time to get people, and so you can treat them with just conservative treatments, diet, lifestyle, nutrition, things like that, address dietary shortcomings. Whereas with conventional medicine, when you present with a functional problem, a lot of times they're trying to apply an acute treatment to a chronic illness. And it's just, they miss the boat. They're trying to, if they can't come to the root cause of the problem, which a lot of times they don't, they just mask it. And I use the analogy, it's like driving by a burning building. Instead of putting out the fire, you smash the fire alarm and keep going, and unfortunately, that's the typical medical model these days. And it's getting worse. What led me, like Kendra said, I encouraged her to drop insurance because the insurance was dictating. I don't want an insurance company dictating the length of time that I can spend with a patient, or what types of lab tests I can run on them, or what I'm going to do with them. I dropped insurance 15 years ago when they started auditing me. They'd send a nurse to my office and they'd have to pull charts and start going through it and saying, oh, you spent too much time here. You did this you coded too much over here. And it's like, what do you know? It's like, I have complex cases, I'll see a patient, and if they have, in conventional medicine, the new thing is you can only talk about one complaint at a time. So we know that everything's interrelated. If you go to a doctor and you say, okay, well, I have this problem, but I also have this. No. We can only talk about one. You could talk about, you have to set up 3 or 4 other appointments.
That
It's like
makes sense.
everything's interrelated. That's the big disconnect here. That's what we're missing in conventional medicine, and it will never change. That's the biggest problem. So I think that conservative care, naturopathic care, nutrition, diet, life should be the forefront. That's the first thing that should be done. And last resort should be the drugs. You know, I'm not opposed to certain medications. I mean, I think that technology has advanced. There's a lot of decent medications and drugs out there when used at the appropriate time. But a lot of times they're just using it in a case where it just needs to be, it's a functional problem. You just have to clean up the person's diet, get their nutrition proper, and then the things will disappear. So I think we need to do that as a community, and we need to push for it. And hopefully things will change in the future. I think it is. People are sick of it. People are coming to see me. They can't stand their conventional doctors. They're afraid of the hospital. They'll do anything they can to stay the hell out of the hospital. I think that's what taught people during COVID. You stay out of the hospital, you know, so that was a good thing.
Yeah. It was a good thing, a very good thing.
Yes. This is one of these shows where if you're somebody that's been going down this path and you're frustrated and you're running out of time, just because you're starting over again. I don't know who to speak to. Boy, I feel like we just have a ton of different options for people to get started. If they're unsure where to go, like all of the websites that the co-hosts have mentioned today are all going to be in the show description. So if you're running around town or you're driving or you're working out or you're doing something and you don't have a pen to write it down, don't worry about it. When you're done, you're going to have a long list of websites that you can go just in the show notes that will get you started. If you're somebody that feels like I don't know where to go, I don't know, you know, maybe I'm in the Northeast and I need to speak with Nancy. How do I get a hold of Nancy? Nancy, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you? Because I'm sure that you're going to have people that say, thank you for coming on. Now at least I know where to start.
Well, thank you for having me. So my website is just my first name and last name, which is Nancy, Nancy Guberti, G-U-B as in boy, E-R-T-I. And I am active on Instagram. I post a ton of educational information, really empowering. So my whole philosophy is that we want you to go on this wellness journey because it's a lifestyle and it's to reach total wellness of mind and body. And, you know, I think the best thing is gaining insight onto how your body is functioning. And yes, you could bring your CBCs in, but they, like we said, have heard, are extremely limited. Yeah. And like for cortisol, so you go to the doctor and they take the cortisol that one moment and they say, you're fine. And I'm like, oh God, it's cringeworthy because you have to really follow that 4 times at least throughout the day to see what pattern you have. That's hormonal, perimenopausal, anything, stress. And I would say that you also have to look at every facet of your life. So sometimes it's overwhelming. So we take one step at a time. Because honestly, if this is a lifestyle you have now and for the rest of your life, to really embrace it, and you end up loving every aspect because you become mindful. So if you're mindful for your health, it actually has a ripple effect into your relationships. It has a ripple effect into your career choices, your finances, everything. So that's really, you know, what we work on. I used to work at Goldman Sachs for 15 years before I got into this for 24 years. So, you know, when someone's selling their house, I'm like, oh, by the way, you might want to look at these funds, you know, and it's no fees. Like, that's really great. You know, so like we really have to, instead of putting even your finances in somebody else's hands, you could actually learn on all factors of your life. So that's really what I love. And I have a Total Wellness Empowerment Institute that offers accredited programs for practitioners and even individuals who want to get into the field, because I feel that you need more like-minded people, because the goal is for the betterment of humanity. And it's very rewarding, I know, for us practitioners, but for you to live your optimal health. And on a side note, I love nano silver. I believe that using nasal nano silver after Xlear nano nasal spray really helped prevent so many diseases, including COVID. I use nano silver in toothpaste, tooth gel. I spray my throat with it. I take a shot every morning. I'm all in. I'd love to get more information about the eczema because I have families
Keith
that
is
work
nodding
with
in
it.
agreement.
So thank you. And
Well-
I'm so honored to be here with everyone today. You are all amazing people in your own right. And I'm just honored to be part of this conversation with
We're
all
glad
of
to
you.
have you. And you're a force multiplier. You know, you're teaching the teachers that can then go out and teach more people. So that is a real fantastic way to get the message out. You know, you come to this information when you're ready. I've found that it's tough to drag people to it, but I always offer. They know I'm here if they have questions about it. And one of the people that, you know, I ditched my Western doctors a long time ago. We don't have much in common. Christian Yordanev is my certified health practitioner, has been now for a couple years. I'm never going back. He took a look under the hood in a way that they never suggest. You know, he was offering solutions. He was offering ideas on how to fix things. They were treating symptoms. I didn't really have any symptoms. I wasn't a good moneymaker for them, so they didn't like me as much as I didn't really like them. So grateful to have Christian involved in what's going on over with. Mention the new book. Tell everybody where they can find you. Sign up for your program.
Yeah, so the book is called How to Actually Live Longer, Volume 1. And I also have a podcast, How to Actually Live Longer. Just stick that into your podcast player. How to Actually Live Longer. Subscribe to the podcast and learn why low carb diets are shortening your life. Intermittent fasting is shortening your life. Fasting will shorten your life. And a bunch of other mainstream nonsense is gonna shorten your life, and learn how to actually live longer and increase your longevity and health span and lifespan, of course, not just lifespan, but also health span. That's super important. We want to be functional. Also, you're gonna recent podcast episodes, I've gone over some research that shows what is the optimal amount of exercise in terms of muscle strengthening activity. You may be over exercising, very likely. And also in terms of endurance type activity, what does the research say? And you may be over exercising in that specific way. And a lot of folks, they're diligent and that's respectable, but they may be pushing a little bit too hard and not meeting the stress where it's at. And I see that in my tennis club. I recently joined the tennis club here, and I see these guys. Tomorrow, the 70-year-old guy challenged me to play tennis, which goes to show you how terrible he thought I was. But the guy's there every single day. I'm there. He's there, and I'm there like 4 or 5 times a week. And he's actually in decent shape, but a lot of guys, I see them pushing themselves really hard. A lot of ladies in their 50s, 60s pushing themselves really hard. I don't see the peri-workout nutrition. I see a lot of folks pushing hard, not meeting the stress where it's at, because at the end of the day, it is stress. Exercise is work, it is stress. So you can learn stuff about that kind of stuff on the podcast. And then if you need personalized help with your health, you can also schedule a free metabolic function assessment with myself, and we can do a deep dive on your health, and you know, I can help you get some clarity on that. But details will be in the podcast description. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the invite to be part of such an amazing panel of incredible individuals. I was texting my wife, "Oh my God, you should see this panel of people here. What the fuck am I doing here?"
let's wrap up. So I'll mention them since some of them had to drop off early, but as I mentioned, you'll find their names and contact information down in the notes below. We had Pat Miletich, UFC Hall of Famer. You can get his super soldier formula over at chemicalfreebody.com. Tim James was here, chemicalfreebody.com owner. You can't have a conversation with Tim that's less than an hour. Keith knows what I'm talking about. And so I've had those conversations where we just talk about how he just gets into the nitty gritty. But I'll tell you what, man, that guy is obsessed with keeping chemicals out of his products at any cost. So if you're looking for a place with supplements that actually work, Chemical Free Body has been a sponsor of my show since I started for years and years. So go ahead and check that out. We also had Dr. Kendra Becker on. You can go to drkendrabecker.com to find out more information. She said one of the we were asking the question in the notes in the message board. She said to us that in terms of one of the things that helped improve her life, it was moving from Connecticut to Florida. And so sometimes you might need a change of scenery. Maybe you need a little bit more sunshine. Maybe you just need the state to stay out of your affairs to the extent that you can. And she suggested taking a look at that. We had James Lyon Wheeler on. You can go to jameslyonwheeler.com and find out information. Apparently he is working with the Maha group. I did not know that. I guess Ricky did. Fantastic. If you can get chemicals out, if you can get accountability for this criminal cartel running the pharmaceutical industry, then I am all for it. I mean, I'm not, go for it, guys. And also we had Tom Cowan. You can go to drtomcowan.com. Listen, you guys want to get into germ theory, terrain theory, he's your guy for that. Ricky Varandas was here. He was nice enough to start the show, but he's such a good guy. He has to go run off and be the coach for his kids' basketball game tonight. So I told him I would land the mothership without his assistance. We appreciate that. But if you're looking to catch him, you can go to therippleeffectpodcast.com and catch his interview with Dr. Jack Kruse, which is out now as well. If you want to find out, that guy goes as far down he's so far down the rabbit hole, I can't even see his ankles. You know what I mean? He's all over the place. So check out Ricky's interview with him. You can go to tinfoilhat.com or tinfoil hat podcast. samtripoli.com is the best way to go. Find out about our friend Sam. He's all over the place, man. He's everywhere. He's got a new special out. So check out Sam Tripoli's new special. And of course, Midnight Mike couldn't make it tonight. He's, I think, fighting the New World Order somewhere. So you can go to obdmpodcast.com to see everything related to the funniest podcast in the world. Macroaggressions, my show, is out. Go check it out. I've we had Jimmy Jean, my good friend, on. I had Dr. Andy Wakefield on a couple of weeks ago. We talked about Vaxxed, and we talked about his new movie, Protocol 7. So it's all happening. Thanks, everybody. If you want to connect with us, you can go to theunionoftheunwanted.com and find out how you can support the show. Take care. Thanks. Okay, I think we're done.
All right, hey, Charlie, if you want that DOD information, I can text it over to you, and then you can give it to everybody else if you want. It's a great summary.
You're gonna put me on a list?
No. It's just information that they released.
Send it to me, of course.
So make sure I have your
I got your number.
So just send me over a text, and then you can send it to everybody else. But it's a really great summary, and it's from them, right? The DOD released it, not me.
That's great. Well, it's a verbal judo, right? Use the weight of their words, the momentum of their words against them.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would love it. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Guys.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Charlie. See you, bro.